I think one of the things that you said to me when we spoke prior was
Mhm.
that, typically when you push people to this extent that, something eventually slips, and what ends up slipping usually is people. And I
Yeah.
thought that was a really profound thing to say.
Mhm.
When it comes to the strike that did not happen, I heard that the union actually had authorized a strike, and then they backed down from it. Now,
Yes.
in regards to that specifically,
Mhm.
union membership said that they had reached a new proposal. Uh, in this new proposal, are you seeing your demands being met, or is the proposal like lining up with what the members were wanting? Like, what does it currently look like?
In my opinion, no, this new contract does not do enough at all. It does not kind of fulfill, it does nothing to really fundamentally solve the issues, those five kind of main issues that I laid out. Um, Basically, the short timeline was we had been at the table with the AMPTP, which is basically the studios and the Netflixes, the studios and the networks. So your Netflixes, your Apples, your Amazon studios, but also NBC, Fox, CBS, and millions of production companies you've never heard of. Um, we had been at the table with them for several months, trying to negotiate a contract. Our contracts go on 3-year cycles. So our last contract expired or started and expired in 2018. And so we had been negotiating with them for a while. Um, After also having been in near constant talks with them and other unions and guilds with regards to coming back to work after COVID. So we had a return to work agreement that was going on and was set to expire. And we needed to renegotiate and re-ratify our deal, our minimum basic agreement. So, but the AMPTP stopped coming to the table. They just refused to meet with union negotiators. So the union leadership sent out a strike authorization vote, and membership returned a result that honestly was stronger than I was expecting at all. 90% of membership voted, and we voted 98% in favor of a strike authorization, which is, I mean, that's just insane. And we're talking about like 60,000 people. That's wild. And this is for a union, I'll say, that has never gone on strike before in the union's history. So that is really, really agitated and fired up labor force. So once we returned that authorization, the AMPTP and the IATSE negotiators went back to the table and started talking again, and that we were due to strike on last Monday. So Monday the 17th or something, 18th. I can't do math. I went into theater. Um, we were due to strike then, and on Saturday evening, we received an email that a deal had been reached, and so we would not be going on strike. Unfortunately, a lot of people had already done like the work and the labor to prepare for a strike, and none of that time or effort will ever be gotten back. So the timing was a little bit frustrating, especially given that the deal that they settled on, was nothing on paper. Like, we still haven't seen what the actual agreement is. And this is now eight days later. We've heard the basic points of the agreement, but my understanding, I still have a lot of questions. And it seems like there's a lot of stuff that hasn't fully been ironed out. Just on those kind of 4 or 5 main topics, the living wage, folks with my position, like the lowest paid workers, will be getting a substantial pay increase. The minimum rate will be going to $23.50 with an increase over the next coming years, which is great. And I'm very grateful and very happy for that. One thing that's unfortunate is that that rate actually isn't a living wage for all people in Los Angeles, depending on if you have dependents or children or a partner. All of that stuff kind of factors into whether that's a living wage. And unfortunately, it's not a living wage for everyone. Also, the pay scale increases across the board for everyone is going to be 3%, which unfortunately is less than cost of living expenses increases year over year in Los Angeles. So basically, the agreement would be most of the crafts accepting a pay decrease in the coming years, because we can expect cost of living to continue increasing more than 3% every year, especially in the wake of COVID. In fact, I was in rent-controlled housing, and my rent was allowed to increase more than 3% year over year. So it's like it doesn't even cover a rent increase in rent-controlled housing. I believe my rent control increase is like 4.1%. So more of your paycheck would be going to your expenses. You're effectively taking a pay cut. So that's for the living wage. For reasonable rest, this does nothing for reasonable rest. Like, there's a lot of complicated reasons why they have added in a mandatory turnaround, but if you're not capping the amount of hours that can be worked during a week, you can then end up with like rolling weekends. I think it gives producers an incentive to have us working 6th and 7th days, because if they can't give us a 54-hour weekend, then they might as well just have us work a 6-hour day, or sorry, a 6th day, so that they can squeeze in the shorter weekend with the one day. And I don't think it's good to give producers any more incentive to have us be working 6th and 7th days. One of the reasons, just to explain this, that we do work 6th and 7th days really often in the industry, it's not necessarily to get stuff done before a deadline. It's because all of the equipment and space for a show is getting rented. And so any days that you're not worked, you're still paying for the equipment. So like, and that's what really makes television expensive. It's not the labor, it's the stuff. So lighting equipment, camera equipment, stages, trucks, like dozens of trucks, trailers, dozens and dozens of trailers, like all of that kind of stuff, you're paying for it, even if you're not shooting. So you need to make working a 6th and 7th day more expensive than an extra day of renting that equipment, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
This contract does not do that. And it also, it just doesn't really do anything in true effect that will help us with reasonable rest. They increased the meal penalties, starting with the 5th meal penalty, which they're every half hour. So
what's a meal penalty?
A meal penalty, I'm pretty sure this is something that exists in just like normal labor law, but a meal penalty is basically a fee that you get paid if you're not given your meal break on time. Because it's the law that you have to get, I think, a meal break after 6 hours of work on any job. And so it increases that, but starting at the 5th meal penalty, which is 2.5 hours late on your lunch. So if you think you've already worked 6 hours, so it's 8.5 hours. And in my opinion, I don't think it increases it enough that it makes it like cost prohibitive for producers to do. I think that it's not enough. So the third thing, sustainable benefits. I won't really get into this because I'll be honest, it's the part that I have like dug least into myself. The true root of the problem is we're still not seeing any share of the success of streaming companies. And because we're not seeing that, we're going to end up with a problem for all of our benefit funds for productions that stay in one place. So if Netflix produces something and then also is responsible for distributing it, we won't see that. We'll only see really portions of money when something gets sold from one place to another, is my understanding. I don't really think that that's super sustainable for us to not be holding new media to account. I do know that new media is now being more included in some of they're not being accepted as like these ramshackle little productions anymore, which is good. But I'm very confused by the way that they're getting broken up, because I think that from what I've seen, like part of it has to do with the amount of consumers a streaming platform has, but new streaming platforms are popping up all the time. So what if you're on a show that is being made for a streaming service that isn't live yet, so it has 0 subscribers? Like, what then? And what's the incentive for then like Disney to not just start breaking down into a bunch of mini streamers and always be paying the lowest amount? But that's besides the point. Then safety. I think safety is really tied to reasonable rest. And the truth is, if we're not reasonably rested, if we're not at our best, we will not be safe. There is a cost to making anything, to making film, to making any product. There's a cost to that. And all of these companies want to cheap out on the cost. They want to pay as little as possible. And so what it ends up being is it ends up costing human life. Like, in so many ways, it ends up costing literal human life, like in the cost of Helena Hutchins or the dozens, if not hundreds of others who have died as a result of unsafe film sets or long hours. It costs human life in that people can't have families and they can't see their friends and loved ones. It costs human life in just like earth-shattering injuries. I know also in the news last week was some of the stuff that happened on the set of Batwoman. And, it was in the news last year, a PA was paralyzed from something unsafe going on set there. That is a life-altering human cost. And as long as these companies continue to try to scrimp and save when it comes to their workers, we will continue to be the cost.
Yeah. And I think, kind of like to wrap this up here a little bit, you were telling me about how a lot of these stories have now been coming out through something called IA stories, which I went and looked up on Instagram. There are thousands of them, of people just giving their experiences of what it's been like to work on these sets and all the different horrors they've been going through and just the outright labor abuses. It's phenomenal to see that all this has gone on and that it really hasn't been widely reported until just now. It seems almost incomprehensible that this amount of, I guess, just what's the word I'm looking for here? These kind of abuses could go on for so long and that no one really was speaking up about it.
Yeah, just completely in the shadows. It's all of these like kind of not so secrets that we all have in the film industry. I think it was so fascinating to see. I think it was last year when the public learned that Ellen was an alleged monster. I don't know if I have to say alleged, because everyone knew that in town. Like, everyone in Hollywood knew that forever, because everyone knew a person who worked on that show and they'd heard a million stories. And that's how it is now with all of these shows that are on the air, winning so many awards, all of these movies, all of these actors. There's just a undercurrent of labor abuse, an undercurrent of human suffering, which is, I don't think anyone wants that, right? Like, if you found out that your favorite TV show, someone was paralyzed working on it, or someone died driving home, or someone suffered 3rd-degree scalding burns because there was a fire, or even like the more quote unquote mundane costs of someone decided they couldn't have a family because of the hours they were working, or like someone's marriage ended because they weren't able to spend any time with their spouse, or like someone had their house foreclosed upon because they couldn't afford their mortgage. All of these things, you wouldn't want to watch it anymore.
No.
You would have no interest. It's all of this hidden brutality that, we're very good at our jobs. We're very good at making what is on screen beautiful and appealing and shiny. But in effect, we're almost covering up our own exploitation.
Yeah, and that's actually a great way to kind of like bring this to a close, because whenever I hear these conversations, I talk to some of my friends about, what's going on in, this industry in Hollywood, or I was talking about things, happening all over the country right now. John Deere is on strike, Kellogg's is on strike, coal
Mhm.
miners are on strike, whiskey workers are on strike. This is across the country. And
Absolutely.
the question always comes up, it's like, why don't these people just quit and find another job? And that's always the question that comes up. But then you turn around and you see these things are happening to people all over the
Mhm.
country. So it's like you probably just land in another situation like that. But let me ask you more directly, why do you work in this industry? What is it about, I guess, working in television that makes you stay in this environment?
Um, that's a great question, and a question that we all get. Why do you stay? I have a couple reasons. The first reason is the people um, are just the best. They're crafty and scrappy and so smart and so able and so caring, and so creative. It's the best people to surround yourself with for life, in my experience. Like, just truly, I love my comrades so much. They're awesome. Truly, like, I am in awe of what they all can do. The second reason is because I love television. I love movies. I think that they're so important and they mean so much to so many people. They can be like truly groundbreaking. They can cause you to have empathy for a new experience. They teach us so much about society. They help to form society, and our kind of understandings of what society even is. They, um, they're the current, modern, most prevalent form of storytelling. And I love telling stories. So that is personally what keeps me in it, that I love what television is, what it does, and what it means to people. Um, in a more general sense, I understand the impulse to, not you, but when people ask this question in general, I understand the impulse to ask the question. But as a person who really subscribes to systems theory, I think that we can't chalk any of this up to a single personal decision to stay or go. And also, like you alluded to, go to what? Like, what industry is better? I think Hollywood makes it really clear, because you have like the abject two sides of money and poverty, and glitz and glam, and like abject struggle right next to each other. Like, you literally, for a TikTok star movie vehicle Netflix did called She's All That. I think it's She's All That, but it might be He's All That. They literally they were doing sweeps of homeless people around LA for that stupid ass movie. And they also kicked a COVID testing site out of our big train station, so that they could shoot in there. So you can very clearly see the inequality in Hollywood, but it exists everywhere else. It's just maybe the CEO of John Deere doesn't live 2 miles from most of his factory workers. Here we do. Like, I'm sure I could go find Reed Hastings' house. I'm not going to. Like, that is a joke. Like, I'm kidding. Please don't send the LAPD after me, but it's all right here. And there's no escaping any of it. Like, there's just not, especially as we get towards the conglomeration that we see in our industry, but even larger. We're all working for the same 4 companies at the end of the day. Most of us are working for Amazon in some way, shape, or form. Even UPS or USPS drivers, if 80% of their packages are Amazon packages, they're kind of working under Amazon conditions. So we have a world that is so interconnected and so driven by these unequal systems that, leaving isn't exactly a choice. I think we have to reform the systems.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really do appreciate it. Is there any like place that people can find you at online, or other links you might want to direct people to as we kind of close this out?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me and for letting me speak on this. And thank you to everyone who's listening or watching for, hearing about what's going on in Hollywood. I know that it is far easier and far more interesting to kind of go to like tmz.com and see what's happening on the more elite side of things. So I do know that me and all of my comrades do really appreciate those who are kind of watching out and listening for us. I'm on Twitter, spitting out all of my mediocre takes at Senator Naomi, which is senator like the position in our government, and then Naomi is spelled Naomi. I'm also on Instagram. I share lots of the kind of stuff that's going on with our movement right now, and a lot of mutual aid type stuff for LA. And my Instagram is at @that_Nao. You already mentioned IA Stories, which is another great Instagram to follow. And my personal favorite mutual aid project in Los Angeles is the LA Community Fridges. If you're ever in LA, if you live in LA, please consider looking them up. If you're not in LA, try to see if there's a community fridge initiative in your area, or if not, see if you might be able to start one. It's a really, really great mutual aid project that I feel really, really grateful to get to participate in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Naomi, for coming on. For everyone who's interested, those links will be in the episode description below. So go ahead and click into the episode description now, and you'll be able to see those links. Thank you, everyone, for showing up for this episode today. We're hoping to have Naomi back on in the future, hopefully for better circumstances than an IATSE strike.
Yeah,
so,
or more strikey circumstances. I don't know.
Or more strikey circumstances. All right, everyone. Thanks again for tuning into this episode of Independent Thought. We'll see you in the next one.